You're listening to Aphrodite, My Love, a novel by Quint F. Kamba. I would have wanted at least 4 or 5 beautiful little brown babies with her. Funny, how some things are never meant to be, no matter how much we wish for them, Aphie. When I described her to a friend years later, he said that she was a coconut, brown on the outside and white on the inside. Really unfair description, but there are places in the world where souls are crushed so badly that people totally lose their sense of self. However, that's a subject for another story. My dad's place was in a small town called Stockport in the north of England. It was a really pretty town with the most unfriendly people you have ever come across. It made Rhodesians look like bloody saints. It's the only place in the world I had ever been where people would turn away as I went past them, and the only place I was ever called a nigger and was genuinely scared for my life. However, that was way back in the early 80s, and I think during my holidays I never saw another black face in town there, other than my own family and Paige, so maybe I was more terrifying to them than they were to me. I mean, what would you do if an alien creature suddenly landed in Gweru? You'd be pretty freaked out, right? However, it didn't really bother me much because I kept thinking, you people live in shit little houses, you can't even kick a ball in your gardens, you've got bigger problems than I do, so what are you wasting your time hating me for? Regardless, I really was glad when I finally got back to Zim, because after a while, that kind of attitude from other people starts grating on you. My stepmom was truly amazing. Her kindness and hospitality made my stay there absolutely wonderful. She was also very smart and was a lecturer at a nursing college. We would talk for hours. I mean, Aphrodite, you couldn't believe it. I swear I spoke to an adult on equal terms more in less than a month than I had done my whole life previously. I realized people in England weren't religious zealots who only read one book, the Bible, and thought that therefore they knew everything. They didn't go to church, they read hundreds of other books other than the Bible and seemed to generally have a better understanding of other people. Of course, it's not accurate to judge people on the basis of only spending a few weeks with them, but I couldn't help seeing some major differences between my family in the UK and my family in Zim. If you had asked me to summarize what I thought about the UK back then in 1984, I would have said, based on my 1-month experience in Stockport, the people of UK live in tiny little houses with tiny little gardens. They have lots of things like color TVs and washing machines and computers, and shopping is their religion, and they are not so keen on black people. If they so much as look at one, they have to rush home and wash their eyes before they can do anything else. But that was 1984, not all of the UK was like that. In any case, times have changed now, and Stockport might actually be a nice place with really nice people. So Aphie, I have to tell you this because I think you might find it funny, or disgusting, I don't know. But no stone unturned, right? Remember my friend Innocent? Turns out he wasn't so innocent after all. You know what he said to me once? I think he had enough of me going Aphrodite this and Aphrodite that, banging on and on about you and how beautiful you were and how I wanted to be with you all the time. I did that a lot, to everybody and anyone who would listen. I loved you like crazy, darling. So one day after a game of tennis, we went to that gas station in town on Bulawayo Road. I forget what it was called. As usual, I was banging on about you. Aphrodite this and Aphrodite that. He retorted snidely back at me. So Nkosi, what do you really want with this girl? I mean, what are you going to do with her if you get her? I was kind of taken aback because I hadn't really thought that far. So I was like, I don't know, hold hands, go to the movies. No, he said. What you need is to give her a big cock, and then she will never leave you. I spat out my coke, nearly choking from it. I think I was 15 or 16 at the time. I swear to you, Aphrodite, I never had any obscene thoughts about you ever. All I ever wanted to do was hold you and kiss you on the mouth. You know, like those white boys used to do with their girlfriends at break time. It was like a scene from Happy Days or that movie Grease. The couples would line up the entire length of the main building corridor, smooching the entire break time. They didn't even come up to breathe the whole time. I thought it was really romantic. Yeah, that was as much as I thought about you, other than just being soulmates and kindred spirits. In any case, I didn't even know what he meant by big cock. Just how big did it have to be anyway, so I tried to see if I could picture one, and I did. Back at the old farm, I had seen a couple of our neighbors bathing in the river. On my farm, for some reason, they had really big ones, I mean like donkeys, and that's when they were down. One could only imagine how much bigger they were when hard. If my friend meant that big, then I would have to wait years before that happened. Anyway, one day in the English class with that pretty teacher, what was her name? Yeah, Mrs. Tavel, I saw him talking to that black-haired girl I met in our first year together. Her name was Athena. No one can never forget a girl like that. He was smiling and bobbing his head up and down, his eyes twinkling like the stars. I thought to myself, this guy is completely enamored with that girl. That girl was so pretty I didn't think anyone would want to fall in love with her. I thought she was like the most valuable Chinese Ming Dynasty piece of pottery. If you even touched her, you'd ruin her. I couldn't even imagine someone making love to her, because she would just shatter into 1,000 pieces. When I found out that she was Greek, I thought, she's halfway to being a goddess already. Maybe she'll marry one of the gods, Ares or maybe Hercules or some god like that. So when my mortal friend was talking to her, I thought it was one of the most beautiful scenes I had ever seen at Chaplin High School, and I was like, good for you, innocent, go for it. I wonder if she really did marry a god. As far as beauty was concerned, I thought she was the only girl in the whole of Chaplin High School that ever gave you a run for your money, Aphrodite, except of course, you really were a goddess, with the name to boot. Is it really a wonder I worshipped you so? Letter 16. Here's to the future. Well, Aphrodite, I would like to say this is where I live you now. This was our story, this is my last confession, and leave it there. But I want to tell you that my love for you didn't end that day outside the school assembly hall at Chaplin. I was just angry with you, but the anger didn't last long. After the level exams, I moved to Harare, as far away from Gweru as I could, and removed any chance of temptation to find you. I rented a room in a house in some suburb in Harare, and just spent the whole summer exploring and enjoying my freedom. I discovered drink and my happiness. I was 18. Shed a small tear for me, darling Aphrodite. How many 18-year-olds do you know that can put drinking on their list of accolades? By the time I had finished my A-levels at Prince Edward I was a perfect wreck. I had completely let go of myself. I don't remember much of my time there. My ulcer also came back with a vengeance, so I was ill all the time. I don't think the drinking helped. Gone were the days of my mental prowess, because my grades completely tanked. My trustee memory bank, which had served me so well as a kid, was also gone. I would read stuff and completely forget it immediately after closing the page. I actually thought of going to see a Nanga to see if someone was doing some voodoo magic on me. As if luck would have it, my aunt and uncle that I told you about earlier, the Sabandas, the ones that emigrated back to Zim from England, stepped up and picked up the pieces. For some reason in Harare I had a ton of money and I just partied all the time, enjoyed loose women and drink, and completely lost my head. Maybe I was making up for lost time as a child. Maybe I was drinking to numb the deep pain in my soul. Maybe I had just became a bad boy, I don't know. In the end, Afi, my uncle, arranged for me to go and study pharmacy in Bulgaria. Whilst there, things didn't improve either. The Bulgarians had even stronger alcohol, but way cheaper. The Stolicno was 13% alcohol, and I had a couple of those with breakfast before classes. Some guys pushed a friend of mine off the top of a tower block and killed him instantly. I went to the morgue with a bunch of fellow comrades, and darling, what I saw was the saddest sight I had ever seen in my life. His mangled body all cut up and sewn back together like a rug doll. His skull had been cracked open and the pathologist had stuffed it with cotton and just morbidly stitched it back together. His dark face still looked really handsome, as if he was sleeping. We all cried. I thought of his parents back in Zim, receiving his body a few days later, all their hopes and dreams of a better life, supported by the sun, shattered. It was the saddest thing you can imagine, Afi. It was a real wake-up call to me, and I vowed to stop drinking. And I managed it. For all of one day. Then it was back to old habits. It was freezing cold outside and the ground was covered with several feet of snow during winter. The Bulgarians were a funny lot. They used to call us black people monkeys and would ask us to show them our tails. I never actually experienced this insult directly myself, but my friends said they got it all the time. On the other hand, I liked to just get on the bus and head to the capital Sofia and explore the city endlessly. I found some old markets that looked like a prehistoric painting with stalls selling wild boar, pigeons and ducks. The smell was overwhelming, but strangely enough, I loved it. I felt right at home there. You can take a boy out of the bush, but you can never take the bush out of him. Hey Aphrodite. No one ever called me a monkey or tried to attack me or anything like that in Sofia. In fact, quite the opposite. Bulgarian girls used to wave at me and even run up to talk to me. Some evenings I went to their operas, and I really loved their music and art. I don't know, I suppose you love anything when you're permanently inebriated. In class, I just managed to keep up with the lessons. I think there were 6 or 7 really good people on the pharmacy course. Let me see if I can remember their names, it's been so long. There was Hassan, the tall good-looking Moroccan guy that looked more like a Hollywood movie star than a student on a pharmacy course in the middle of nowhere. There was Sally, a Moroccan girl who acted as if she was Hassan's sister. So nice and gentle to him, but I think actually fantasized about him. She wanted to hurt him, make him mourn, make him explode. I think he knew it and toyed with her. There was Hadima, a Moroccan girl who was skinny and pretty. She had a crush on Hassan. It was so obvious. There was Zalzaya, very pretty exotic Mongolian girl, was very quiet, but I had something of a crush on her. There was Dino, Greek guy who tucked his jumper inside his jeans and never stopped talking for a minute. There was Georgia, Greek girl who was very quiet and I couldn't figure out her story, mother issues or daddy issues I think. There was an extremely tall Sudanese Berber who chewed tobacco leaves and pronounced PSB. So if your name was Paul, you would be Ball. Come on, laugh, Aphrodite. It's funny, no? By this time you were completely rid of me, so you can afford to give yourself some slack. What were you doing with your life then? Did you think of me at all, my love? Baby, you never tried to reach out to me at all. Never wished to know if I was alive or dead or anything like that. How could you have been so cold to me, Aphie? All I ever did was love you. You broke my heart, girl. You really did. I can't bring myself to believe that you hated me that much even after everything. The Moroccans were a happy, jovial lot. I think they were all quite rich, because they didn't seem to take anything seriously. They didn't have any hidden skeletons and didn't have to worry about life like the rest of us lot had to. One day the whole class burst out laughing, because the tutor Mrs. Ivanova had said, "Na mi boli zib," which in Bulgarian means I have a sore tooth, but in their native means, my penis is sore. Hassan was so boisterous. In the mornings you could tell he had arrived, because even though our classroom was 2 floors up and several doors down the corridor, you could hear his infectious laughter booming down the corridor. The Moroccan girls' faces would light up like the night sky at the sound of his voice. It must be so cool to feel wanted by other people like that. Those were some good times, Aphie. I saved this member of my cohort for last. She was a stunning girl called Graziella and was also from Morocco as well. But her mum was Bulgarian. She was so gorgeous. She looked just like the famous 80s singer-songwriter Saad. And just like that, bam! And I was in love again. It was love at first sight. I know what you are going to say, and the answer is of course she reminded me of you. How could she not? She had the same kind of beauty. She had a mesmerizing laugh and a totally engaging personality. Really bubbly and full of life. She talked to me and laughed with me as if we were old friends. But she was like that with everyone, especially her countrymen. How could I not fall in love with a girl like that? The Moroccans all spoke French and Arabic, but I never let on that I knew French. So one day when I heard her say how much she missed holding a man, actually Aphrodite, the language she used was much more seductive and salacious than that. I too had not held a woman in my arms in months since arriving in Sofia and was going insane. Imagine being 20-something and you haven't done it in months. You go crazy, right? Even trees start looking good to you. Anyway, after that, I found her so ravishing and I promptly made my move. I went to see her in her room in the block opposite where I was staying with 2 other students from Zim. I knocked on the door and her roommate opened the door and let me in. Her roommate was a tall, dark, and extremely pretty Nigerian girl called Remy. She looked like the famous 1980s catwalk model called you know the one. Graziella was sitting on her bed in a night dress. She made no attempt to cover up her bare legs and shoulders as I entered the room. The beauty of a woman is just the most wonderful thing you can imagine, Aphrodite. It's God's gift to humanity. The beauty of a woman is like the first light, like the birth of a star, like Big Bang itself. I thought Graziella looked like all those things rolled into one and then some. I wanted her like a hole in the head. I was going to make her scream so loud they would be able to hear her, all the way down in Cape Town, South Africa. Pretty long way for sound to travel, but I was burning like an out-of-control wildfire. Did you know that in some cultures, they make women cover up every inch of their bodies when out in public, to hide their beauty from the blue sky? It's a real shame. Imagine the poetry, the art, the inventions that are lost to those cultures, because in my humble opinion, it's the beauty of a woman that has inspired everything mankind has ever created. Back in the day before Europeans came to Africa, African women from my lands, only needed to cover up their vitals and everywhere else was laid bare. What a wonderful sight that must have been, Afy. Damn you Cecil John Rhodes for colonizing my country and destroying my culture. An African man could have 7 wives back then. Now look at the mess. Thanks to that baboon. One day I'm gonna dedicate an entire volume to just name bash that monstrous colonizer. Graziella sat straight up on the bed, almost arching back a bit so her chest stood out, braless, tits pointing through the nightdress. Her short nightdress rode up even further, exposing the entirety of her light brown legs. An inch higher and you would have seen her knickers, white, pink or blue, pick a color, any will do. But fact is, if that had happened I would have had a heart attack and they would have taken me out in a body bag straight to the morgue. She emanated a torrent of celestial, seductive, enchanting and irresistible allure. I was captivated by her spellbinding smile, bewitched by her mesmerizing eyes and totally lost for words. I honestly don't know what blubbering nonsense I uttered to her, but all I know is I was as hard as a ramrod. She told me that I was a nice guy and all that, but I was not her type, but not to worry because the right person would come along for me. I thought, what does she mean the right person would come along? Does she know somebody? I turned round to look at her roommate, whose face just read one thing. Don't even think about it, Buster. I started begging her, but she shook her head, taking her gaze off my face for a moment, signaling it was time for me to leave. I knew that this battle had been fought well, but lost good and proper. Thanks to you, darling, I had learned from the best how to handle rejection. Well, see you in class, Graziella, I said, turning to leave. Remy slid the door open again and waved me goodbye with her fingers. I heard giggles and the door shut behind me as I walked down the corridor, nursing a huge erection. The embarrassment and disappointment brought it down very quickly and I went back to the room I shared with my friends, Donald and Wesley, in the block opposite. Letter 17. Beatrice Danger de la Cruz. So Aphrodite, my darling, let me introduce you to someone very, very special to me. She is the only woman that managed to completely unseat you from your golden throne in my head. Let me introduce you to my girlfriend in Sofia, Bulgaria, Beatrice Danger de la Cruz. The most amazing, beautiful, wonderful woman ever to come into my life. I mean, actually, be part of my life as opposed to someone I wanted to be in my life, but who didn't want to be in my life. Beatrice and I met under the most auspicious and beautiful circumstances. But first let me lay down the groundwork. In the meantime, you and her get to know each other. You have so much in common, and oh, you'll have to get on with each other. You'll see what I mean later. You were both incredibly beautiful women. One of you loved me to death, the other couldn't stand the sight of me. Do think when you two talk, you could find a middle ground? In Bulgaria, we had emerged from the worst winter I had ever experienced in my life. I really had no idea a person could leave Africa, move to Europe and be able to survive sub-zero temperatures, in snow and ice for months on end on a poor diet of bread and alcohol. But I had done it. My body was quite a mess as the diet in Bulgaria was atrocious. My ulcers were so bad they were off the scale and I was heading for the edge of a precipice. I knew if I continued like that I was going to wind up dead, but I didn't really know how to stop. By June or July the weather had already broken and summer was well on its way. The student village was bustling with students free from their studies and looking for something to keep them busy. I still had a couple of exams left to take. One evening Donald, my roommate I mentioned earlier, announced that there was a film that had just come out and was going to be shown at the student theater. He wanted to know if I wanted to go and watch it with them. I wasn't really interested, because in reality, the theater was merely a smoke-filled, dingy room with benches and blackout curtains. I was getting ready to refuse and carry on revising for my exams when he said, "The film is called Coming to America, and it's got Eddie Murphy in it." Well, every Zimbabwean knew who Eddie Murphy was from such films as Trading Places and Beverly Hills Cop. We loved him like crazy, so of course I would go, even if they would show the movie in a dirty, stinking bathroom. I was so amazed with Donald, because after watching the film, just once he knew the entire script by heart, repeating every scene line by line. It's all we ever talked about from then on. I won't lie to you, Aphrodite. Coming to America changed my life completely. I quit drinking like a fish and started cooking and eating healthy food, and not the poison they fed us at the student canteen. It took less than a week to start feeling like a human being again. You won't believe how low I had got to up until that point. One afternoon, soon after watching Coming to America, my friends and I were all in high spirits, listening to music and enjoying the warm Bulgarian summer, looking forward to a long summer break. My friends were talking about traveling to Greece to work on farms picking tomatoes to earn some extra US dollars. I told them that, after my life at the plot, I would rather starve to death than work on a farm ever again. My friend Wesley suddenly looked out of the window and smiling and calling us said, guys, come here quickly. Come and look at this girl." We rushed to the window and what I saw blew my top off like Mount Krakatoa. Walking along the path between the two blocks was a divine goddess. She had long wavy silky black hair that hung down all the way to just below waistline. They were thick black waves that bounced along with her every step. She was wearing a very short white dress, her light brown skin glowing like gold under the warm Sofia sun. Time stopped. I threw the window wide open and hung my head out and shouted, "Hey, you stop." The girl stopped and looked up at the window. I waved down at her and shouted, "You are the girl I've been waiting for all my life." She laughed. I sang the first line of The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face by Roberta Flack to her. She did a little dance and touched both hands on her heart and was about to turn and walk away, but I shouted, "Wait there, I'm coming down. Aphrodite, you've never seen anything like it." I was running down the corridor trying to put my shoes on and falling over, getting up and tying a shoelace of one foot, running, falling over again and doing the other. I bounded down the stairs 4 steps at a time and ran outside, and Anne was standing in front of her faster than Carl Lewis could run the 60-meter dash. We embraced, hugged as if we had known each other all our lives. I had never ever felt so happy, so complete, so alive in my whole life before than that moment. We separated our embrace, arms still interlocked, both laughing, studying each other's faces, discovering what we liked about each other. It was everything. I loved everything about the girl, from her hair down to her toes, down to the ground she stood on. Thank you heavens, thank you Sophia, thank you Zimbabwe, thank you Donald and Wesley, thank you Graziella for turning me down so gently, thank you universe for delivering this beauty to me. I realized that everything that had happened to me all my life had led to this moment. "What's your name?" I asked her in Bulgarian. "Beatrice," she replied, smiling, and not even pulling away from me. "Zabavo Iame Zabava Mamish," I said, using a phrase I had learned in the first week of the Bulgarian language classes 9 months earlier. It means beautiful name, beautiful girl. I told her my name and asked her if she could give me her block and room number so I could come and see her sometime. I memorized it and we said goodbye and agreed to meet soon. This was my Genesis 1 verse 1. From then on there was no Nkosi, there was only Beatrice and Nkosi. Not long after an encounter designed by the gods, Beatrice and I started dating. For our first date we went to the Sheraton Hotel in the middle of Sofia Square. We were serenaded by a guy playing a violin. We held hands, put our arms around each other and kissed. That night we went back to her room and made sweet love. Her heart beat in unison with mine. Her skin was soft as silk, her lips sweet as honey. But it was her warm embrace, our bodies entwined, my head buried in her sweet scented hair, that I finally found solace. I had finally found my soulmate, my kindred spirit. Our journey into the future began that night and nothing would ever tear us apart, no matter what. Beatrice was a nuclear physics student from Havana, Cuba. So she was smart as well as beautiful. She possessed this entrancing allure that radiated from her very presence. Her luminous almond eyes seemed to hold secrets of distant lands, adorned with long fluttering lashes that cast gentle shadows. Her light brown skin, reminiscent of warm caramel, glowed with a natural radiance that spoke of her Spanish and African origins. Her long black hair, cascading in luscious waves, danced in harmony with the soft breeze that surrounded her. Her smile could rival the brilliance of Sophia's sunshine. The sweet scent of her skin, her sensuous lips, adorned with a touch of rich plum, set me on fire with desire. Every movement she made, every glance she cast, was choreography intricately woven by celestial hands. She could have moved heaven and earth with just a single gesture. Her voice was the music that created the first light, the cosmic Big Bang that echoes through eternity. And she was all mine, my Beatrice Danger de la Cruz. After an eternity and a Herculean struggle, I had finally found love, Aphrodite. Back when you and I, Aphrodite, were young, there was a song called Love the One You're With by Crosby, Stills and Nash. Really nice jazzy and soulful tune and all that. I was fighting tooth and nail to win your love without any success. The song would come on the radio, and it sounded like it was saying I should just give you up, because if you can't be with the one you really want, just love somebody else. I mean, you can't just say, I love that woman or that one will do. Like you're choosing a pair of shoes, right, Aphrodite? Love is far deeper than that. It comes out of the blue when you're least expecting it. It's like death, nobody knows when they are going to die, not even people on the death row. Love can kill. Love can elevate. Love can liberate. You don't choose love, love chooses you. Sorry JKR, reference to Harry Potter. But is love not the greatest magic known to man? The reality though is, if you can't be with the one you love, you're completely fucked. Only the highest power in the universe can help you with such a demise. Beatrice's and my love flourished with astonishing speed. We were so in love that when we walked together arm in arm or arms, round each other's waists, people stopped and stared and strangers wished us well. I was in heaven. For that reason, I have a certain kind of deep admiration of Bulgaria. Unfortunately, I can never go back there. Not without my bee, the pain would kill me outright. It was during this whirlwind romance that I got a letter from my dad, pretty much summoning me to come to England. Naturally, I was excited to go, but really, it was because I needed to get so many things for Beatrice and I that we just couldn't get in Bulgaria. I didn't tell you this before, but I had gone back to the UK for another holiday and spent time with my UK family, but things had not gone down very well that time. By then I was old enough to immediately surmise that economics and expenses of all my travels were a big factor. There is no such thing as a free lunch, and I had learned that at the plot, that hellish crucible that crushed my soul. All that malarkey had been about the cost of feeding extra mouths. Besides, Uncle Sabanda, the one in Harare, had already convinced me not to go to the UK in the first place, because despite the pretenses my parents weren't as committed to my happiness as I liked to think. He said, go to Bulgaria, get your pharmacy degree and come back to Harare and find your own path. It was a noble quest and I had vowed to give it everything I had. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I jumped at the opportunity to go to England and see if we could work things out. Beatrice and I talked about it. I could tell she was concerned about my going away because she kept on saying, you will come back to me, Nkosi, won't you? With a worried look on her face. I didn't know why she was worried because she was my world, my everything. I could have moved mountains for her, drained the oceans dry if that's what she had asked me to do. There was no way in hell or high heaven that I would not come back to her. Excuse me while I wipe the tears from of my eyes, Aphrodite. Beatrice, my dearest love, the only woman I've ever truly loved and truly loved me back equally. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. The gods will never forgive me for this cowardly act of treasonous treachery against your very being. My soul roams the fringes of darkness adrift, seeking its way back to you to this very day. The day came for me to leave for England. There was no direct flight from Bulgaria to England then, or for whatever reason I could not fly from Sofia, so I had to take a coach to neighboring Greece and book a flight from there. I think it was late July or early August, because Bulgaria was already in the thick of summer. It was so hot that you could walk around in a t-shirt and shorts all day long. The stark contrast in the weather between summer and winter in Bulgaria was remarkably uncanny. Beatrice came with me to the coach station in the center of Sofia. The coach station was right outside a really nice hotel whose name I can't remember, something like Vitosha or Hilton, I can't remember and I don't really want to remember it either, Aphie. There was some time to kill, so we went into the hotel lounge and ordered a couple of drinks. I ordered a glass of Courvoisier cognac. They didn't have the Martel that my Uncle Sabanda was so fond of back in Harare. The first sip of a drink was always the most delightful experience to me. After that I kept drinking, not because I enjoyed it, but because I couldn't stop until I dropped. I had completely stopped drinking since meeting Beatrice, and that first sip of cognac just hit the spot. Beatrice looked ravishing. God, my girlfriend was so beautiful. I moved closer to her on the hotel lounge sofa and kissed her long and hard, feeling every corner of her mouth with my tongue, tasting her, drinking her. If you ever want to know what the taste of light is, hear the drumbeat of the universe speaking through the ages and feel the gentle embrace of love touching your soul then. Aphrodite Kasim, surrender yourself completely to the power of love. In that fleeting moment, beneath the gaze of the world, Beatrice and I converged into a singular entity, a radiant spark of light that could never ever fade. She was wearing a white dress with thin straps around the neck and shoulders that came up a couple of inches above her knees. The sight of her caramel brown skin filled my whole soul. It was like drinking from the secret golden cup of the gods. A drink of light, of time, of life itself. When it was time to go, we hugged and kissed some more. We didn't want to let go of each other. I got on the coach and saw that she was crying. I ran back down and took her in my arms and wiped the tears off her face and kissed her some more. The coach driver blew the horn on the bus, but I didn't care. People on the coach clapped and cheered. People on the hotel steps clapped and whistled. "Come back to me, Nkosi, come back to me," she sobbed. Oh my God, what did I do? I'm not religious or anything like that, but forgive me, O Lord. The conductor separated us and I reluctantly climbed back on the coach. The driver set off. I was waving at her all the way back, to the back of the coach until it went round the corner, and I couldn't see her anymore. That was the last time I ever saw my true love, my Beatrice. Beatrice Danger de la Cruz mi amada, 10% esto. Nunca me separ verdaderamente de ti. Has residido en lo más profundo de mi corazón todo este tiempo. Mi corazón late al unisono con el tuyo. Están entrelazados inseparables. Descansa tranquila. Pues un día regresar a ti, tal como prometí. It was also the beginning of the rest of my life. A misery that surpassed anything that had come before. I can still hear her voice to this day crying. Come back to me, Nkosi, come back to me. Oh, the ruthless hand of destiny, the vindictive spirits, what tragic sequence of events could separate us and sever Beatrice's and my sacred and divinely woven union. Letter 18. Just who or what the hell am I? I'm a monster, Aphrodite. A monster. I deserve to be dropped in the center of an imploding supernova, crushed and turned into cosmic dust, and when the supernova explodes, bits of me flung to the distant realms of the universe. But I guess you already knew that. A monster and a coward. A loser. Go on, say it. Keep it coming. Fool. Idiot. Donkey. That's right, you can go on all day and you would be right with every one of those descriptions. Anyway, my love, I'm coming to the end of my confession, the end of our story. I just have to tell you one more thing and we're done. This is not going to take very long at all now. Don't forget what I said, I will tell you everything, and you can be the judge, jury and executioner, and decide to send me to the gallows, or to show mercy and forgive. I told you about the boy from Rockford in Shirugwi, my primary school, who died after being bitten by a black mamba. Things like that happen all the time in the bush. Aphie. I remember that day as if it was yesterday, yet it was 47 years ago. I remember thinking that I could be next. I grew up on a remote farm in the bush and I encountered deadly snakes almost daily. Sometimes even staring eyeball to eyeball with the snakes. So a bite to the nose or lips and that would have been the kiss of death, by Nkosi, no meeting Aphrodite for you, mate. So I ask myself often, why do I get to become an ungracious old man whilst that boy was taken from us before his life even began? Why did fortune favor me, to bring me to this auspicious moment, that I should be able to speak to a true goddess such as yourself, my love? Who am I? What am I? What is my purpose? I can't answer any of that. I'm not smart enough to comprehend it. All I can really say is that I have, throughout my whole life, followed my heart blindly wherever it took me. I've made my fair share of mistakes, and I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that I alone am responsible for everything that's ever happened in my life. I can only pray that you don't judge me too harshly, my love. Even though I deserve the harshest of rebukes, I share this with you and the rest of the world, in the hope that if one or two other young men or young women read this story, they might glean insights from my mistakes, helping them evade the very pitfalls that ensnared me. When I finally got to England after leaving my beautiful Beatrice behind in Sofia, I was already a seasoned traveler and was really in high spirits. I wanted to buy so many gifts for Beatrice. I couldn't wait to see her face as she unwrapped gift after gift after gift. I would be her Prince Hakeem, and she would be my Lisa McDowell. For the final gift, I was going to wait for the right moment, maybe after a night at the opera, maybe during a meal at the Sheraton. I would watch and wait until the perfect moment. And when the moment was just right, like the stars aligned, and Beatrice was happy, laughing under the moonlight in Sofia, Okay, I'm just trying to build up some suspense here. When the moment was just right, I would bring the diamond ring out, bouquet of red roses, get on one knee and say, Beatrice, my true love, will you make me the happiest man in the world, a mighty Zulu warrior, slayer of the dragon, Gebamabunu, and be my wife? But the universe had other plans for us. Shortly after I arrived back at my dad's in Stockport, in England, things began to unravel in ways that brought the shaky foundations of my life tumbling down to a heap of broken dreams. No truths remain hidden forever. I found myself faced with an ultimatum and a choice that put me between the devil and the deep blue sea. The choices were quite simple: go back to Bulgaria and be completely cut off, and never get another chance to travel to the UK, or stay in the UK and do a course there with some limited help, and when I had completed and fully able to support myself, bring Beatrice over to the UK and have our happy ever after. What do you think I chose, Aphrodite? What do you think I chose? I'll let you think about that for a moment. If you said to go back to the love of my life, you're, well, how shall I put it? Completely wrong. Shock horror. Right. For over 3 decades, I've carried the weight of that wretched affair, burdened by shame. Monster. I know, Aphrodite, I know. Beatrice called me a couple of times, distraught on the telephone. In between sobs, she asked, Do you not love me anymore, Nkosi? Oh, Aphrodite. I'm in so much pain, darling. So much pain. What am I? What sort of person could inflict such pain upon someone they cherished with every fiber of their being and soul? I told her I loved her. I loved her more than anything in the world, but I couldn't come back to her right away. I was going to figure something out, and we'd be together soon. No sooner than the decision to stay in England had been taken did my dad basically threw me out of his house with the words, You're on your own, son. Aphrodite, you won't believe this. You know, I told you that when I was about 9 or so, my sister and I were all set to leave what was then Rhodesia, to go and live with my dad in England. The date came and passed, but we never did leave Rhodesia. Years later, I tried to find out what happened. It turned out that someone in my family had spun an elaborate lie to bring our hopes up and see us crash with disillusionment when it didn't happen. Aphie, who would do such a thing to a poor child? When you are a child, your parent is your world, and to be given hope and then have it snatched away like that is truly abominable. That one thing, Aphie, completely fucked me up beyond repair. Do you see what I'm saying, darling? How could I have been anything but completely crazy back when we were so young? But why put all this on you? I hear you ask. For a start, this journey called life. We're not meant to travel it alone. When I met you, Aphie, you were the light, you were the guiding star, you were the sun. I flew straight towards the light, towards the sun, and got burned. I totally understand. Anyway, getting back to the story. When I left my dad's place, I luckily moved in with an old cousin of mine, who'd been in the UK for decades. He took me in and I ended up getting a cleaning job at some factory. I worked there for a couple months, drinking myself to a stupor every night to forget my situation, until enrolling onto a mental health nursing course in a small town called St. Albans, just outside London. The course was really quite brilliant, Aphie. On the course I was in a group of about 8 students, of all about the same age, early 20s except for one 19-year-old and a 35-year-old guy. I remember thinking that guy was so old, how swiftly time passes, and how rapidly the tides of fortune shift. Warning! Warning! The next chapter has explicit scenes and harmful content. Please do not proceed if you have a sensitive disposition, or if you wear a pacemaker. The hospital stood like a grand old institution, resembling an army barracks in its grandeur. It comprised a teaching facility, multiple wards catering to inpatients and geriatric care, as well as student accommodations nestled within a rectangular block, all surrounding a serene grassy courtyard at its heart. Each student had a room to themselves, but amenities were shared by corridor. It snowed in winter and the ground was covered by snow a foot deep. Red squirrels chased each other under great big old oak trees and scampered up and round the tree trunks. It was a sight of England I had only read in books, and I couldn't believe I was really there, watching it with my very own eyes. Right from the start of the course, things turned out to be absolutely amazing. I was getting paid whilst doing really simple work and getting an amazing education. The studies on mental health totally resonated with me, and I totally immersed myself in trying to learn as much as I could. I made up my mind pretty quickly that I wanted to become a psychotherapist, like Sigmund Freud. I was getting top marks in everything, so I was well set to achieve my new dream. But that wasn't all. The icing on the cake was discovering freedom for the first time in my life. Not needing someone else to provide my home, my food. Anything. I really understood what the word independence meant then. My cohort consisted of students from all over the globe, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Helena, Ireland, Mauritius, and Zim. St. Albans was a really pretty small town, set on a small rising hill. On my first foray into town, I was confronted with the most beautiful, amazing young blonde women with gorgeous honey-colored golden tans you've ever seen. They cast their opal blue eyes at this young virile African man staring at them with bemused interest. There weren't many black people in St. Albans back then, in fact. Whilst there, I never saw any other black person other than the ones at the hospital and one black Jamaican patient suffering from marijuana-induced schizophrenia. For months I was just drunk on the blissfulness of a newfound freedom and happy life, that I didn't even need to drink at all. Life had finally turned round the corner for me. One day, several months into my new course and job, I was working on the ward, when I noticed that this young blonde woman kept looking at me, and every time I turned round she was there. She had her blonde hair tied back in a pony and looked quite timid, like a little lost sheep. I was wondering what the hell she wanted and thought nothing of it until my shift ended and I was heading back to the residence halls. Suddenly, I heard someone shuffling behind me and calling my name. I looked round and came to a stop when I saw my pursuer striding towards me. She had let her hair down. In an unexpected rush, the wind tousled her hair to one side of her face, and the English hazy sunshine poured through its strands, igniting a fiery glow. Now, where had I seen that before? She wore a red short-sleeve open-neck t-shirt with buttons all the way down. The t-shirt was tucked neatly into a pair of blue jeans which accentuated her tiny waistline. I started wondering what she could ever want with me. Had I perhaps forgotten to sign out? Had something happened? Was I going to be fired and thrown off the course? She came up to me and smiling asked what I was up to. She waited for a response, all the while smiling. A gentle breeze shifted small strands of her hair across her face and she tossed her head back and the hair obeyed and fell neatly back into place. In that moment, the realization of her breathtaking beauty hit me like a megaton nuclear bomb. She was a true beauty, an English rose, her skin a flawless canvas of coral and peach tones, adorned with rosy cheeks that seemed to beckon a caress. Her pale, vivid blue eyes held a seductive allure as they danced like an enchantress. As she parted her lips to speak, her full, luscious bottom lip quivered ever so delicately and said, "I love the way you handled that group session this morning. You'll have to tell me how you plan it." "Ah, I see what's going on here," I thought to myself and smiled. "Thanks, I will be very happy to. What are you doing this afternoon? Do you want to go for a quick drink? My car is back at the residence," I replied, pointing at the student halls a short distance away. She offered to drive as her car was parked close by. We jumped into her little red Peugeot 305 and drove to a pub called the Three Horseshoes. She told me her name was Isabel, but I could call her Izzy. We ordered some drinks and sat outside under a parasol basking in each other's company, with a deep sense of curiosity and amazement at our distinctiveness. She took my hand and turned it over up and under, comparing my chocolate brown skin with her rosy pink arms. Within minutes, we were kissing, exploring each other with our mouths. "Let's go back to my place," I implored her, ignoring my half-finished pint of Lowenbrau and her half-finished white wine spritzer. I couldn't even tell you how we got back to my room, but soon we were on the bed discovering each other in the greatest exploration ever made since Cecil John Rhodes navigated all the way from the Cape of Good Hope to the Zambezi, whipping African slaves with a deadly sjambok. We kissed, we devoured each other's mouths. Sitting on the bed and her sitting on me, I explored every inch of her skin with my lips and tongue. I buried my face in her sweetly scented blonde hair and breathed in deeply, sucking her aroma deeply over my nasals into my lungs, a memory to be stored for eternity. For such a small woman, she had really large breasts, shaped like pawpaw fruits. I cupped each and sucked hard. She mourned and ground hard with pleasure. I held her small, but firm butt cheeks, squeezing and pulling her down to me in rhythm with her breathing. I looked at her face. She had her eyes closed, her rosy pink skin glowing with tiny bits of sweat. Mwana wevenha akenge akanaka ayahia, Aphrodite Shamwari. I kept staring until she opened her eyes. I saw in those gorgeous blue eyes, way beyond the stars, beyond time, beyond infinity. She kept her eyes open, looking into mine. I was like a wild animal, the human being in me cast away to the devil. She gasped for air. I bit her bottom lip gently and she imploded, gushing like the Victoria Falls. She climaxed so hard she became as limp as a sleeping beauty and collapsed on my shoulders. We made love for hours on end that afternoon, exploring every inch of each other's bodies. I turned her over onto her stomach, placed a pillow beneath her hips, and took her from behind. I hammered and pounded her hard. I thought she was going to break, but she was eager. She had no trouble taking me. I lay down on her back, cupped both her large tits in my hand, letting the nipples slide through my fingers, and squeezing them gently at first, then harder and harder, and I squeezed harder. She screamed and I pummeled her mercilessly. Months of built-up pressure and endless priapism finally releasing like Mount Vesuvius. We took a breather and ate some cornflakes with milk and lots of sugar. She wanted to see if she could fit the whole black thing in her mouth. She couldn't, but that was fine because that was just a novelty to me. I much preferred a long sensuous smooch and the sultry taste of her mouth. Afterwards she said she had to leave because her boyfriend would be home soon. Can you believe that? The next day I couldn't walk. It was really funny. Actually, I forgot to tell you about my best friend in Bulgaria, a Zim guy called Enrico. He was the first of our cohorts to score a record at just 3 weeks or so into our courses in Bulgaria. He was a tall, very good-looking, light in complexion guy with the sharpest mind I had ever known. He was a mathematical genius, who loved music and loved to talk endlessly. That guy could keep you laughing all day long with all sorts of funny stories. You think I have a good memory, and I do. His was off the scale. He had all kinds of stories to tell, with such amazing detail and eloquence. Enrico made me listen to Dire Straits and I actually enjoyed them. However, I was more into artists like Luther Vandross, Kool and the Gang, Colonel Abrams and Prince of course. And oh my god, Aphrodite, I nearly forgot. Have you ever heard of an artist called Narada Michael Walden? He had a song called Lucky Fella. I actually recorded that song on a cassette and tried to give it to you as one of the many gifts I tried to send to you to win your love. It was a special translucent green cassette, selected especially for you, darling, and I drew lots of love hearts on it before recording the song and sending it to you. Of course you sent it right back to me. You were so cruel to me, darling. I'm sorry to have to say that to you. How can you just hate somebody right from the outset without even talking to them? I guess it can happen, but I would at least talk to them and explain why, right? I listen to that song all the time. I swear it fortified me to keep trying my luck with you. I'll never forget it. I'm a lucky fellow and I'm bound to get to you. It went. Do you speak any Shona, darling? Aphrodite, Afi, Shumwari Wakandi Baya Mumoyo Wangun de Kafa, Vakandi Rasha Murinda Chero Iwi. One look at you, Aphrodite, and I was spellbound for life. How is that possible? Standwa Sami? Futhin Gayak Thanda Namakanjani, Aphrodite Kasim. Ingekanga Kukowi. Sofa Slalain Thina. Anyway, I was telling you about Enrico. Soon after we started our course, he was studying engineering, but he told us he had met this gorgeous Bulgarian woman who had invited him to her home. It turned out the woman was a nymphomaniac. They had literally stayed in bed from Friday to Sunday afternoon, fucking like rabbits. We were like, you're lying, man. At that point, he whipped his trousers down and showed us his huge cock. I had never seen anything like it. It was raw, as if someone had sanded off all the skin from it with rough sandpaper. It was the funniest thing I had ever seen. You know that saying that there is no pleasure without pain. Well, is that a great example or what? Don't get angry with me, Aphrodite. I did tell you I was going to tell you everything right. So you can't like say, oh, why am I saying all these things? Am I trying to hurt you or something? No, not in a million years. You darling Aphrodite, I love to the ends of the earth. I love like there is no tomorrow. You don't even have to love me back, so it costs you nothing. What's it like for someone to worship you, and you actually don't need to do anything to earn it? Vakuru Vinodi Machinda Akadlisawa you. But no, it's just love, nothing more, nothing less. If you want to hear something really sick, how about this? Just to feel a sense of atonement. Back in the day, I used to imagine really violent deaths like facing a firing squad. 20 high-caliber rifles aimed at my head. Fire. And pop goes the weasel. End of Nkosi. Would that be retribution enough for you, darling? Would it atone for all my sins? Darling, have you ever listened to a song called Ntilo Ntilo by a South African artist called Rithobile Kumalo? I love that song like crazy. It speaks of go-go, grandma, and reminds me of my own grandmother. It's evocative beyond belief. Her grandma dies and she's begging her mom and dad to help. But the song is really about unrequited love. But listen to the chorus when the Zulu women sing Mama Ndinseed. Kawanji sighs mama. The then Ndinseed Kawanji sighs the, help me mom, help me dad. If you listen to the music really carefully at that point, you can feel heaven and earth meld into one. For a few brief seconds time ceases to matter, you feel like you can grasp light between your fingers, life and death become just a mirage. You feel everything and nothing at once. That Aphrodite is love. So where was I? Oh yeah, my friend Enrico. We'll come back to him later. Let's get on with the story. The mental health nursing course was going so well. I was a top student without a doubt. To be honest, I could have done it in my sleep, it was that easy. As they say, I was living the dream. But, as you saw throughout this story, the universe does not like an imbalance. Too much pleasure and the scales become unbalanced. So some pain must be introduced to the equation. Sometimes when the scales have tipped so drastically in one direction, the process of restoring equilibrium demands a considerable measure of anguish. Izzy and I never got back together. She called me after and told me I was an animal. Go figure. I spent all of one day trying to reach her, to no avail. I moved on without even thinking about it. I was becoming something I didn't even recognize. No sentiment. No feeling in my heart. I didn't realize it at the time. But the curse for tormenting you and for leaving my Beatrice in Bulgaria had been cast. It was for me never to love any woman, as deeply and in an all-consuming manner as I had loved either of you two ever again in my life. Not long after my encounter with Izzy, it seems I was always in luck. Wherever I turned, the party never stopped. One afternoon, I was exploring a boarded-up old wing of the students' residence after getting hold of a skeleton key of the halls. For some reason, when something that has stayed with me for decades happened, that residence wing had fallen into decay, but was an interesting find to look around. I went from room to room just looking, observing and making note of a treasure trove of history. It was like a time capsule. They had all sorts of stuff from the 60s and 70s in some of the rooms there. After a while I came to one particular room, and as soon as I pushed the door open, a cold shiver ran down my spine. A vision of a young woman with black hair wearing a blue flowery dress flashed in my head. She was screaming and in great pain. I quickly shut the door and immediately made off to the exit. I was walking fast but not moving. I felt a chilly breeze brush past me and the exit door swung shut all by itself. I was gripped with paralyzing fear. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. I wanted to run, but my legs were paralyzed and stuck to the ground with fear. With the greatest of willpower, I managed to reach the exit door. Frantically fumbling with the skeleton keys, I eventually opened the exit door and got out and promptly kicked it back shut behind me. The automatic lock engaged immediately. I felt like I had escaped from the jaws of death with my life as I stood motionless, leaning against the door, breathless and panting as if I had just completed a marathon. I was back on my own wing, gasping for air, trying to figure out what had just happened when the door in front of me opened and out popped this gorgeous Irish girl with long auburn hair that reminded me of a certain teacher from Chaplin High School. She had the most glorious long auburn hair and green eyes like a warm summer by the lake. She was a senior student in her last year. I had only just commenced my second year. She eyed me suspiciously and asked what I had been doing snooping around the forbidden wing, and did I know that an Indian girl from Mauritius had died in a fire there. But before I could answer, she jumped on my mouth and was kissing me voraciously. The terror had turned me as white as a ghost, and I was still trembling ever so slightly. That kiss was unexpected, but quite a welcome distraction. Although the girl was only my height, she was incredibly strong. Eating my mouth, she picked me up by the waist, kicked her door open and flung me onto her bed. She stripped down to a pair of white knickers. I kid you not, Aphie, you can't make this shit up. I was taking my t-shirt off, whilst she worked on my blue jeans and was sucking my dick before I had the t-shirt off. She had to work on it some, because all the blood had been drained from my veins due to the ghost scare. Once she had it going, she just moved her pure brilliant white knickers to the side and impaled herself on my cock. She ate my mouth, kissed my head, ears, neck, chest, moobs, navel, arm, hands, fingers, everything. All the while, pumping and grinding me like a demon unleashed from the depths of depravity. She moaned and groaned, and I sat up and bit one of her tits really hard like a hungry wolf. She climaxed, gushing so violently I thought she was peeing on me. Her eyeballs rolled backwards and she fell forward and flopped on my chest. I was not ready, so I let her drop on her stomach and took her from behind. I cupped both her breasts in my hands, letting the tits slip in between the fingers. You guessed it, a real favorite. She squeezed her butt cheeks and milked my dick with her pussy, and Jehovah, I was fucked. That turned out to be the best fuck I've ever had in my entire life. After that, I was changing girls by the week, by the hour, and I was living the dream. I know what you want to say, Aphie, but hold on. I'm coming to it. Patience is a virtue, and all good things come to those who wait. I promise you, you're not going to be disappointed. In all that, I did manage to have a long-term relationship, longish, about a month or two, maybe longer, I don't know. This one was something else. She was another Irish girl with the longest gorgeous red hair you have ever seen. Long silky wavy curls that reached her bum. I can say bum right. Now we have reached the letter of carnal depravity. She was like 10 years older than I was. Tall like a model with a body to die for and an ass so round and big it was enough to make your eyes pop. I had literally forgotten why I like redheads. Okay. This story is getting too raunchy for my liking. I'm not trying to rewrite 50 Shades of Grey here. You won't believe it either, Aphie, but I actually tried to watch that film once and it was too raunchy for me. That's how much of a prude I am. This woman's name was called Shannon Brown. We actually had a real good relationship, but after a while she did confess that she only wanted to fuck and nothing else. She didn't want a serious relationship, and she never wanted to carry anyone's babies in her womb. I told her. I thought that was very sad. She was so beautiful, the world would be worse off without her beautiful babies in it. She was definitely real marriage material. I really liked that Shannon because we were both kind of broken. She told me once that she had been gang raped whilst traveling in some South American country. They had beaten her and left her for dead. They had damaged her so much she had to pee using a straw. Poor woman, she told me she actually grew up on a farm in Ireland, just like I had grown up on a farm in Zim. I liked her because being about 33 or so, she was 10 years older than I was, and a real woman, you know, like those gorgeous teachers I had crashes on as a boy. One morning, after a good night's sleep, I opened my eyes to her standing up by the window, completely naked, smoking a cigarette and blowing the puffs of smoke out of the window. Actually, that was the only thing that I wasn't keen on about her. That and the fact that she hated any kind of heat. Even when it was below zero outside, and it was snowing heavily, she liked to have the window wide open. I would be frozen to the bone and she'd be like, "It's so hot in here." So that morning she was leaning outside the window, completely starkers. I had an eyeful of her big ass, gorgeous, flawless long peach legs. Her long wavy red hair as thick as a lion's mane reached all the way to the small of her back, covering her back like a mini dress. The morning sun pouring in from the window gave it a fiery glow. Her hair parted in the middle as she threw her head back to blow the smoke away, revealing an arch of silky smooth peach skin all the way to her neck. She was like an ocean of sensual allure, with the power to entice any man to depths of sexual depravity unknown to mortals. I was instantly as aroused and as hard as a ramrod. I climbed out of bed and went up to her quietly, softly like a black timber wolf stalking deer. I took a large swig of her black coffee from the red mug resting on the window ledge, swished it round my mouth and swallowed. I entered her slowly from behind. She was already dripping wet. She let out what can only be described as a cough mixed with a moan, mixed with groan, mixed with a grunt, something animalistic like, "When I die, I'm going straight to hell, Aphie." I started ramming her hard from the get-go. She was a tall, strong, fit woman, no shrinking violet, and could take it. I pounded her hard like a black stallion. Flash. And I saw a barefoot Indian princess walk onto the edge of the Ganges River carrying a basket of washing. She was wearing a green dress and her long black hair was adorned with flowers of all the colors of the rainbow. She placed her basket on the ground beside her and started gathering her long dress up and tucking it into her underwear. With every tuck she revealed more and more of her flawless caramel golden brown skin. High and higher she went. Lighter and lighter her skin got until I could see the promised land, her knickers white as snow. My manhood grew harder and thicker than it ever got before. Shannon felt it and gasped for air and mourned loudly, turning around to kiss me. I ate her cherry red lips and pushed her back to her original stance. Flash! The Indian princess bent down to wash a garment in the water, revealing more of the top of her legs. Her long hair fell to her sides, touching the water. Her derriere moved gently up and down as she scrubbed the garment with all her strength. I lost all sense and sensibility, cupped both Shannon's breasts in my hands, let the nipples slip between my fingers and squeezed gently. She moaned and screamed harder, harder. She tried to turn around and kiss me, but I pulled her face roughly back to stay exactly where she was. Two young women walked across the courtyard and, hearing her love-making noise, looked up at the window and, seeing the reason for the noise, scurried off, embarrassed. Flash! The Indian princess in the green dress suddenly stood up. A gust of wind blew all her hair forward, revealing a bare back, bare caramel soft brown neck and shoulders. She wrung the garment in her hands, and as she did so, ripples of soft muscles danced in her shoulders and arms. She wrung the garment hard and water gushed back into the river in big tear drops like a shower of diamonds from the gods. I squeezed so hard on Shannon's nipples it must have been painful to her, because she screamed and climaxed, rivulets of sensual delight streaming down my legs like some heavenly life-giving essential oil. I wanted her to have my babies, many, many babies. Aphrodite, my love, I never stood a chance against your spell. Not even one bit. I was spellbound, enchanted, and only you could free me from those chains. For the first time ever since falling for you, Aphrodite, I had succumbed to a lifelong desire. The bittersweet taste of imagining what it would be like to make love to you. No man can conquer the power of a woman. The good book tries to tell us that a woman was created from the rib of a man. That is bullshit. Women wove man into existence through a melody and the very essence of their beauty. Just listen to Paige from Stala and Paige sing Ganima, and you'll understand the depth of this truth. Women crafted men as adornments, as playthings, mere distractions to amuse them. Yet, as men recognized their own insignificance, they felt like mere pawns, expendable creations to be discarded once used. In response, they conjured up the concept of God, a refuge from their inability to grapple with the potent control women held over them. Today, even the most influential men on the planet are reduced to naught but children in the face of a woman's smile, a flick of her hair, or the gleam in her eyes. Even the mighty Genghis Khan, who sought to dominate every woman's soul, found himself thwarted by their indomitable spirit. Every battle, every war ever fought has been for the love of a woman. Man might win battles against woman, but he will never win the war. The universe does not like imbalances. My hedonistic ways continued, and I started having an interest in this gorgeous English girl called Kate. She was the most fascinating woman I had ever met. I was around the age of 22 or 23, and she must have been about 20 or 21. She was tall, athletic, with the strongest, sexiest legs you have ever seen on a woman. She had the tightest, gorgeous hard ass you could imagine. If she was an animal, I would have said a tigress. But in spite of her exquisite physique and amazing good looks, she had this sad, mysterious look about her face. She looked like she could burst into uncontrollable sobbing at any moment most of the time. But her mood would suddenly change and she would be bright and cheery as a light bulb, the happiest, most lively person in the room, and without warning switch back to that sad, mysterious face. I found her so intriguing and fascinating. I loved her face. It had a certain kind of mysticism about it, vulnerability yet hidden power and strength. She was much taller than I was, but that didn't bother me. I just thought they would have an easier time with a big black cock. You know what they say, don't you? I don't know if it's true, but who the fuck cares? We started doing everything together, but like friends and never admitting to each other how we really felt about each other. And I swear, Aphrodite, I was starting to fall in love with that girl. One night, we went to see a newly released film called Pretty Woman. We held hands the whole time and laughed at the same jokes. I noticed how her mouth was so similar to the main actress and I wanted her so bad. We looked at each other longingly, but we never kissed. After the film, when we got back to the residence, I kissed her on the cheek and bid her good night, like a perfect English gentleman. What an idiot I was. The next morning Kate came to my room whilst I was preparing to get to lectures. She was crying profusely and seemed very distraught. She was wearing a short white nightdress that was barely covering her, and I could see her breasts and pussy quite clearly. I held her face to my chest and comforted her. She sobbed and sobbed. I wiped her tears with my hands. I wanted to kiss her mouth, but I just kissed her cheeks and told her not to cry and everything was going to be all right. It was like something was stopping me from what I really wanted to do, which was to rip her nightdress off and make love to her so tenderly, tell her I loved her and I was going to take care of her forever, that we were going to have a baby together and raise it to become a superstar. I would never leave her. I would never let her out of my sight. I swear it's one of my biggest regrets in life. But I'm kind of glad I didn't do anything stupid, because I really didn't want to take advantage of her since she was crying and I didn't understand why she was crying. Yes, I could have just asked her. But something didn't feel right about the whole situation. The fact though is I really liked her and I wanted her to be more than just another girl I had slept with. Unfortunately, after that morning she moved out of the residence and I never saw her again. I met other girls after, but Kate stuck in my head forever. Do you think that something permanent happens to your brain when you fall in love? Is there a physical or permanent chemical change that gets created in your brain and then you are fucked because there's no way of getting rid of it? I think that's exactly what happens. One should really be careful about falling in love. It's like growing an invisible limb. It remains somewhere on your body forever, even if no one can see it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say, Aphie? If you fall in love and that love is not resolved, you must live with a very painful appendage in your body that you cannot get rid of. It can't be surgically removed without killing the host. Gruesome analogy, but I'm kind of an expert in this area. It was soon after my friend and hopeful Kate disappeared from my life that I found myself on a placement at another mental hospital. I got involved in the treatment of a young male patient and something really horrible happened. The patient was a young man of about 25 or 26. He was the funniest, happiest guy you could imagine, and unless you knew his circumstances you would not be able to tell that he was mentally ill. I got back to work on a Monday after a glorious weekend to find out that the patient had committed suicide by jumping off a bridge and perishing when he hit the ground below. The news was so unexpected, hit me really hard. I just flopped in my chair and sobbed. I was thinking about my friend in Bulgaria, that I told you earlier about, who was pushed from the top of a tower block and was found dead on the ground, all broken and mangled. When someone young dies, you just know that the parents behind that person are going to be so distraught. It bears description. Even after all the books I had read on mental illness, I still could not understand the depth of despair that could drive somebody to take their own lives. How low must one feel to do such a thing? It didn't even occur to me to think that I myself had contemplated suicide on a number of occasions, but then it had never occurred to me that I was mentally ill. I was studying it and never once thought it applied to me or anyone I knew. Something profound changed inside me that day, though. Suddenly I realized I was living a lie. I realized that all the girls I had seen before weren't interested in me in the slightest bit. I was a charlatan, a harlot, and was being used and didn't have a clue what was going on. They were just going, "Hey, there's a nice black Testarossa. Let's take it for a test drive." I was getting shafted without knowing it. I told you I was a slow learner, right, Aphie? I was actually an idiot as well, to boot. I started drinking again. They say it never rains but it pours, but the one thing I dreaded the most, and had been simmering buried at the back of my mind, suddenly popped into the foreground and demanded to be noticed. A letter from Bulgaria arrived for me in the post via my parents' house in Stockport. I guess they must have forwarded it on. Yeah, do you remember the good old days, Aphrodite, when we used to have to write each other letters that took weeks to reach their destination? Nowadays people just send a text or email. How I wish we had something like that back then. The letter was from my friend Enrico in Bulgaria, telling me really bad news. It was that Beatrice was suffering from depression because of what I had done to her. She had become so skinny she wasn't eating, she was crying all the time. I dropped the letter on the floor and cried like a child. I knelt on the floor next to my bed and tore my hair out. I put my hands over my face and I could feel her pain in my heart. I could feel it with every cell of my body. I was shaking. I felt like I was killing her slowly with a broken heart. I didn't know what to do, Aphrodite. Things were so complicated back then. I couldn't just jump on a plane and leave and go to Bulgaria. I wanted to write back to her. call her and tell her I still loved her so much, and to just wait a bit longer and we'd find a way to be together. To this day, Aphrodite, I don't know why I didn't do any of those things. I didn't do anything, Aphi, I just tried to bury the pain, like I had always done as a kid. Instead, I drank more than I had ever done before. Money was no object, the booze was cheap and the pain too great, so I drank. But nothing had prepared me for what was to come next. This is next to impossible to describe, and I've never relived that period of my life, so it scares me to even look back at it. But I said I'd tell you everything, Aphrodite, so that's what I'll do. Not long after I got the letter about my Beatrice, my world fell apart, Aphrodite. I fell into what I can only describe as the darkest period in my life without exception. The walls caved in on me and all I could see was the deepest darkness you can imagine. The nights were the worst. I would wake up in the middle of the night terrified, feeling like I had been buried alive. I felt so alone, so lost, without hope and without a future. There was not even the slightest bit of joy in my heart, just total darkness and emptiness. I should have sought help, but I was afraid if I told anyone I would be thrown off the course. How could a person training to help people from such illnesses as depression become depressed themselves? It's like a policeman becoming a thief, or a doctor becoming a murderer. It's practically unheard of, and of course, they would be fired from their jobs if they did any of those things. I do not know how long the depression lasted. Perhaps a month, perhaps several weeks. I was in such a dark place, Aphrodite, and I didn't know what to do. But at no point during that whole period did the thought of harming myself ever enter my mind. Then one morning, I remember it well. It was a fine Saturday morning. I remember waking up feeling so happy, so full of beans. It was like a heavy curtain had been lifted. The fog in my head just lifted. It was wonderful. The depression had gone all by itself. Oh, Aphrodite, I've never told a living soul about this, but I'm telling you because I made you a promise and I won't go back on my word. I looked outside and the sun was shining. It was such a beautiful day. They say England is a green and pleasant land, and on that day it gleamed like a precious emerald. I jumped out of bed with a spring in my step, but suddenly a voice in my head just said, "What a fine day to die today." I stopped to listen, not sure I had heard right. Fine day to die, Nkosi, fine day. I didn't even bother with breakfast that morning. My mind was made up instantly. Everything became crystal clear to me. I could see things much better than I had ever done in my whole life. I had 20/20 vision, figuratively speaking, if you like. I decided to leave the car and walk to the supermarket to get the things I needed to kill myself. It was such a pleasant day and I wanted to enjoy the warm sun on my face for the last time. I got to the supermarket and bought some paracetamol. I knew that you only needed a dozen or so to get the job done. I bought a bottle of whiskey, crossed the road and went into a pharmacy and bought 2 packets of sleeping tablets. The lady at the counter asked me what they were for, and I told her to help me sleep. I withdrew some money from a cash point and gave it to a beggar. Then I was all set. I cast a final glance upon the world and said, "Goodbye, cruel world." This time I didn't see you, Aphrodite. I didn't even see Beatrice either. Neither of you came to me. I went back upstairs to my room. I opened all the tablets onto the table, got a glass out of the cupboard and filled it with the whiskey and took a handful of tablets and downed them with the whiskey. I started writing my suicide note to my dad for some reason. I don't know what the fuck I said, and I really don't want to remember it either. I'm just annoyed it was to him and not to either you or Beatrice. You were the only people I cared about. I took the rest of the tablets with the whiskey, swallowing them in tranches of 4 or 5 and a swig of whiskey straight from the bottle. With all the tablets gone, I chugged half the bottle down my throat. I didn't even feel drunk. I felt really happy, the happiest I had been in a very long time. I was ready to go and meet my ancestors. I got up from the chair and lay on my bed with my arms crossed like Count Dracula in his coffin. I waited to die. I don't know how long I waited for, but after a while I was like, fuck man, how long does it take to die? I got up from the bed, took my long extension cord, fashioned a rudimentary noose and looped it above the door, climbed on the chair and leaped off.